Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is entitlement. I think it's sort of a buzzword these days, and we get to look a bit into the word and what the dynamics are and should be interesting. So before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating and electrifying and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, and creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel the deliciousness of that sensation, the tickling and the tingling, and allow that sensation to bring you present to your physical body right here, right now, to experience the wonder of these physical forms through which we get to experience life. So welcome, welcome, welcome. It's great to be here with you as always. And today we get to talk about entitlement. It's kind of a dirty word these days, right? When we talk about people who feel entitled as being righteous or self-righteous and maybe selfish and maybe arrogant. And when we talk about entitlements with government, it's often said with a sneer, like that regarding financial assistance and such, that there are entitlements. And I think this, like everything else, is a double-edged sword or a two-sided coin. There are certain things that we are entitled to. And I want to look at those things as well as look at the arrogant assumptions of entitlement. So we get to see both sides, but we are entitled as beings on this planet to clean air, clean water, a healthy environment, right? And our culture doesn't support that necessarily, because there are many corporate who are threatening our right to clean air, clean water, and a healthful environment without being challenged, right? So they have an entitlement to be polluting the environment for all of us, while jeopardizing our entitlement to clean air, clean water, and a healthful environment. Good morning, Lisa. So good to have you here with us. Welcome. We're talking about entitlement and how entitlement has gotten, is kind of a dirty word these days, when people act as though they're entitled. It's often in the context of they're taking liberties that that they shouldn't, where people overstep or step on the rights of others, perhaps out of a notion or experience of entitlement, that they're just assuming that these things should come to them. And when it becomes a problem is when it's at the expense of others, right? So I think it's an interesting thing to be looking at, because there are things just by virtue of our beingness, just by virtue of being here on this planet, as human beings, we are entitled to certain things. Interesting, in our Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is a granted entitlement. And also interesting that while we may believe that we are entitled to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment, we have no spoken guarantee or no spoken claim to those entitlements in our Constitution, which is really, really interesting. So there's a woman named Maya Van Rossum who has come up with a brilliant strategy for supporting environmental safety and welfare. And that is through amendments to state constitutions that explicitly speak to our right in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, saying we have a right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. So good morning, Gia. So good to have you here with us this morning. Welcome. And Lisa says it took us so long to get the EPA where it was, and that gets degraded and destroyed based on the administration that's in power, periodically. So the thing about the laws and the EPA, for example, and even environmental law, is that law can get changed. Good morning, Jorge. Jorge says, I know who I am. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. I'm curious about that. We get to maybe dig into that knowing of who I am. And Jorge says, thank you for being part of my story. Well, that's an honor. Thank you. Thank you. Let me just dig into this notion. I was telling you about the Green Amendment. So if you're interested, you could look up Maya Van Rossum, the Green Amendment. So there are two states, Pennsylvania and I think it's Montana, that have a Green Amendment in their state constitution that is declaring the right to clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment. And the other states in the country don't have such a thing. So when we have laws that are regulating environment and how we can interact with it and pollute and such, those laws can get changed, and they do get changed based on what administration's in power. It happens all the time. However, if something is in the Bill of Rights itself, then the laws need to comply with the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights doesn't get changed that readily. It's a foundational part of our structure upon which the laws are built. So what we're talking about is ensuring certain entitlements. There are things that just by virtue of our being here on the planet, we are entitled to because we are part of nature, right? And nature provides clean water, clean air, a healthy environment, right? Outside of, there may be situations where, thank you, Jorge. There may be situations when our there are not healthy things in the environment that are natural causes or caused by natural circumstances, but we get to protect ourselves against the incursions by forces that are malevolent, shall we say, or that are not concerned for the welfare of others. So I think it's an interesting thing to be looking at what our real entitlements are, and also what happens when we assume entitlements that are destructive to others, that are disrespectful of others, that are predatory. And so we keep looking at these words and polarities that exist within them. The word entitle really means to grant a title. And when we talk about granting a title, it can be like a title like king, queen, whatever that kind of title. But also granting title is granting ownership. And for instance, when we transfer a property, we're transferring title, or a car, for instance, or real estate, we're transferring title, and that is creating an entitlement. And when we think about ownership, we are entitled to our fullest expression. And we don't normally think of entitlement in that context. When we think about ownership, there's often a notion of status that is associated with it, right? Of hierarchy of value, or of status works, right? In our culture, so much of our hierarchy is built around wealth and ownership. And if I own more than you own, or you own more than I own, the person that has the more toys wins, kind of thing. And that gives people, or people assume, a certain degree of entitlement based upon material possessions and material status. So if I make $1 million a year, I'm better than somebody who makes several tens of thousands of dollars a year, or who makes nothing in a year. And that's craziness. It's a false metric that that people who have more money are worth more as humans. So we talk about our value, our personal value, in terms of net worth oftentimes, right? That I'm worth this amount of money. Like, that is an intrinsic characteristic. The money that I have is intimately attached to my value as a human being. And there couldn't be anything more wrong-headed, right? Because there are people who have great wealth who are despicable people, right? There are people who have no wealth who are despicable people, and vice versa. There are people with no wealth who are extraordinary humans, and vice versa. So I think when we look at entitlement, we get to look at, well, what is it that we're owning? What are we taking ownership of? And I believe that it's so important for us to come into our sovereignty, our ownership of ourselves, of our freedom of choice. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about entitlement and how entitlement has gotten has become sort of a dirty word, and yet there are many cases where there are abuses based on an assumed entitlement, and on the other hand, there are things that we are entitled to by virtue of our being that that we don't necessarily assert our rights to. Good morning, Tammy. So good to have you here with us. We're talking about entitlement and what that means. Entitlement means to have a title. And a title is something that when we transfer property, we transfer titles, ownership. Title to something means ownership of something. And we do have, I think we can look at the correlation between entitlement and sovereignty to a certain degree, like where we, by virtue of the rights granted in our Constitution, we have the right to pursue happiness, right? Now that's an interesting concept, right? The right to pursue happiness, but we have title to that. We don't have legal title at this moment to, at least nationally, the right to clean air and clean water and a healthy environment, which is really interesting. And this is something that we get to stand for. And now more than ever, when our environment is so precarious and so imminently threatened, that we get to be putting our attention. I know that we've been very distracted with the emergency of the plague, and it has been a diversion from putting our attention on the urgent needs of our climate and our environment in order to maintain the capacity to be living on this planet. And so I think we get to refocus our attention on the actions that we get to take to ensure that we have these entitlements, that the entitlements are fulfilled, that we do preserve our environment, that we do care for our future, that we take the actions that ensure our future and assert our right to these foundational conditions. I was tempted to say privileges, but it's not a privilege, it's a right. There's a difference, except that there's nothing that is protecting that right for us in so many states in this country, and even in the states where that right is a protected right, the right to clean water, clean air, and a healthful environment, Pennsylvania, and I believe Montana, those rights have not been defended to their fullest extent. So again, to mention Maya Van Rossum has been a champion for something called the Green Amendment, and that is an amendment to state constitutions to ensure the right in the Bill of Rights for the state constitutions, such that they can't be attacked, those rights can't be attacked by laws that don't support it. So Lisa says, Middlesex County, New Jersey has enacted a Green Act. They now will only permit paper, no plastic. It starts soon. That's awesome, Lisa. That's really great to hear. And perhaps this has to start on an even more local level than the state, because there are state laws, I believe, that can override local laws. And that's happened in a bunch of places. In fact, when this Green Amendment, or when, okay, so a friend, thank you so much. Dido put the link to the Green Amendment in the chat. Maya also has a website, and I think it's called, I always have a challenge with remembering the name of it, but I think it's called For the Generations. That is a website about the Green Amendment. Thank you, Dido. It's great to have you here with us this morning. So what happened when Helen Slache, who is an attorney and visionary, she was in New York State, she was responsible for the end of fracking in New York State by going from community to community and having the communities enact rules, zoning laws that essentially prohibited fracking. And then what happened is that the state governments came in and filled that loophole in other states so that it couldn't be something that became a national movement. Thank you so much, Dido. Dido posted the link to the greenamendment.org. And where you can find out more about this movement. It's worthy, it's worthwhile, it's essential for us to be ensuring our rights to our entitlement, to get a legitimate legal title to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. I think we also need to recognize, or get to recognize, that by virtue of our being here on this planet, by virtue of us being alive, that we are enough, that we are sufficient. Dennis, good morning, Dennis. So good to have you here with us. That we in and of ourselves are sufficient. We are entitled to be here. We are entitled to be here by virtue of our being. And I think we get to look at that in the face of the entitlement that is asserted by so many people by virtue of their social status, for example. That's a whole different thing. You know, that's an entitlement based upon false metrics, you know, where people believe that by virtue of their economic status, for example, that they are better, that they are entitled to more just by virtue of their economics or their finances. And I think that we get to look at financial situations as something that is a financial situation is mutable. Someone can be a millionaire one day and bankrupt the next. And does that mean if they believe that they're worthy when they're a millionaire, are they no longer worthy as humans when they're bankrupt? And the other way around as well, when someone's bankrupt, does that mean that they're not worthy as a human? And all of a sudden, if they become wealthy, then they're worthy. So I think we get to look at the way that we value things, literally things, and humans and life on this planet. What are the criteria by which we assess value and worthiness and sufficiency? So much of it is based on externalities that have nothing to do with intrinsic value. And I think this is actually another aspect of this conversation. We talk about entitlements often with a slur when it comes toward financial programs, support for folks that are not as fortunate as many of us. And by couching this notion of financial assistance as entitlements, when the government talks about them as entitlements, it's interesting because it's a double-edged sword. Entitlements are often the things that get cut first when we're talking about government assistance. Those are the things that often get cut, the things that are there to support people who are struggling. And why wouldn't we be helping people that are less fortunate than ourselves? Why wouldn't we be sharing the wealth? Why wouldn't we be helping to support people without this superior attitude or parental attitude? Like, why wouldn't we be reaching out to help our other members of our community? And why would we look down on them for needing a helping hand? So, it's really an interesting conversation, where we look at mine as mine, and this is a whole other conversation, right? But we have become so individuated that and oriented to competition, that we have othered others to the point where there's a profound lack of connection and compassion. And so I think it's interesting to be looking at this notion of entitlement and what it means to be working, being part of a collective, for instance. Good morning, Jennifer. So good to have you here with us. And Rosalind says, groundwater sustainability comes to mind. We were talking about entitlement, that we are entitled to, well, we should have rights to clean water, clean air, and a healthy environment. So Rosalind goes on to say, a community plan outlines what can be developed based on the groundwater portfolio, so limiting growth based on water resources. Well, there's a lot of abuse of groundwater and aquifers. I mean, look at the water companies that are selling bottled water are essentially pillaging community groundwater and aquifers to be able to sell it. And it's a common resource, it's of the commons, but these water companies are essentially stealing that water from the communities for very, very, very little compensation. And that's a whole other story. Anyway, we can get into some, speaking of groundwater, we can get into some deep water here, murky water, because we get to look at entitlement and what does it mean? Like, what are we entitled to? And what are we entitled to when it's at the expense of others? And where does the arrogance and righteousness come into play versus foundational ways of or foundational rights of being? Anyway, I hope that this has stimulated some thought and what it looks like to be, well, we're in a culture where we're out for ourselves for sure. And it's interesting to have a look at that and to imagine what might it be, what might be available if we had a little different perspective. So maybe we can dig into that more deeply in another conversation. But that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. If you have been commenting in the chat and you didn't get responded to, I apologize. It's because I don't see your comments. If you want to comment so that your comments can be seen, go to the Facebook page in Enlightened World Network. And those are the comments that come through this feed for the morning. And if you enjoy this time together, please share it out with people. Dido put a link to the YouTube channel, the Enlightened World Network YouTube channel. Please follow that and share it out, because let's grow this community so there are more of us that can converse and build bridges and richer understanding and communication together. So please follow and please share. And until next time, I so appreciate you. Check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, on EWN One with the Earth, Enlightened World Living. And until next time, so much appreciation and so much love to you. I'll see you again here soon, I hope.